This plane seems like it's on a good approach, but... So how did these pilots get to this point? Join me on this video as you see how a peaceful flight turned into a roller coaster ride for these passengers. My name is Jonathan and this is Minutes from Disaster. Stay tuned. May the 8th, 1997, at 21:00 local time, as the darkness enveloped the skies of Asia in China, China Southern Airlines Flight 3456 is nearing its end after a 1 hour and 30 minutes flight from Chongqing Zhangbei International Airport to Shenzhen Huangtian Airport on a popular and reliable 3-year-old and brand new Boeing 737-300. On board the 737 are 65 passengers and a crew of 9 people, 3 pilots and 6 flight attendants. In the cockpit, at the left seat is 36-year-old Captain Ling Yugui. He has a total of 12,738 flying hours. 9,084 are when he was an operator, and 3,654 are when he became a pilot. On this flight, he is the pilot monitoring. At the right seat is 45-year-old co-pilot Kong Dexon. He has a total of 15,537 flying hours. 11,203 are when he was a flight mechanic, and 4,334 are when he became a pilot. He is the pilot flying today. At the jump seat is 48-year-old observer Zhuang Rong. He has a total of 5,079 flying hours, but he is very new to the Boeing 737 and only has 124 hours of simulator training on the Boeing 737. So on this flight, he is just observing and seeing how a normal flight on a 737 is done. But instead of him watching a routine landing in good weather, Mother Nature has decided to show Mr. Zhao how landing in bad weather looks like. The weather around Shenzhen Huangtian Airport is not great. In fact, it is very bad. A storm had just passed, triggering 2 dangerous weather alerts in the past hour. Unfortunately, signs of its presence are still at the airport, with moderate rain showers and visibility of 1.5 kilometers, which may sound like a lot, but in aviation, it is very low, and with a wind speed of 25 kilometers per hour, which is 30 knots, but it is slowly improving. So it will be a good experience for Mr. Zhuang Rong as he sees how Mr. Ling Yugui and Mr. Kong Dexon land in this condition. It will also be a good experience for you and me if you subscribe and hit the like button, please. Thank you. At 21:16 local time, the plane intercepts the localizer for the ILS approach. The ILS, or the Instrument Landing System approach, is an approach that uses radio signals to guide the plane laterally and vertically on a 3-degree glide path to the runway. With the weather conditions as they are, the ILS is the best option to use. They will be landing on Shenzhen Huangtian Airport's runway 33 or 33. With all the checks done, now the pilots are ready to land.
3456建立盲降，3456联系塔台185，再见啊。航联3456，现在建立盲降了。看好了，就准备
The decision height stipulates that a plane is not allowed to go lower without having the runway in sight. It's considered foolish to go lower than the decision height without having the runway in sight. At 21:18 local time, the pilots are now committed to landing. After bouncing 3 times on the runway at 21:19 local time, the pilots decide to make a go around. A normal flight has now turned into an abnormal flight, with the landing gear not retracting and the controls becoming loose and light. It seems that the tower controller can't see the plane anymore on his radar and is asking them to check their transponder. The transponder basically sends information and location to the controller's radar. If it malfunctions, then the controller won't be able to see the plane's location together with its speed and altitude. It seems that on top of the controls being loose and landing gear not retracting, the transponder has stopped working. At 21:23 local time, the aircraft is currently northwest of the airport, but since they are not able to be seen on radar, they are starting to cause chaos in the airport's airspace. Four minutes after going around, they finally declare an emergency.
现在飞机在警告啊，要下飞机可以让我。但我现在已经要飞机接应你了，你在上边对吧？现在我现在看的是上边位置。往这儿跑道。上面要不要重写一下？我先转一圈。
Since they are a bit fast and high, the pilots decide to make a loop and then land after bleeding off some speed and altitude.
3、4、5、6请就落地以后，消防车、救护车。明白了，我现在已经通知了。
Emergency personnel have been alerted at the airport and are ready for the aircraft to come.
我也请要是能给我降低一点，好不好？现在我从落地5边的时候，你都看。3、4、5、6号线。你看我，你可以用用15号口罩。好的，我看到口罩我在这里。南面紧急的话，5边有雨比较大。明白，我要回过去了。现在准备着。我到5边了。
At 21:27 local time, 8 minutes after the go around, the flight attendants are finally informed of the situation.
情况不太妙啊。落地以后的话，如果不行的话，就准备自己撤离。啊，还有什么事吗？没有了，准备还有1分钟落地了。
At 21:28 local time, the plane is finally lined up on final to land on Shenzhen Huangtian Airport's runway 15, but they look a bit high.
着了吧？都跑到头了，现在。高了，Leg break. Leg break. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. 下班了，开刀！
At 21:28 local time, China Southern Airlines Flight 3456 smashes onto the runway and skids off the runway, breaking into 3 pieces and catches fire, and ultimately kills 33 passengers and 2 crew members. The co-pilot was sadly among the dead. Since the emergency responders were ready and prepared beforehand, 32 passengers and 7 crew members come out alive. So, what happened? Let's find out. It's a good time to hit the subscribe button and to like the video if you like what you see. So, go on, hit the like button and subscribe. I know you can do it. I will wait. On June the 28th, 1997, the Civil Aviation Administration of China made their final report and showed that there were 3 factors that made this crash unavoidable. So, let's look at the first one, the bad weather. A few hours before the crash, a storm had just passed. Unfortunately, even after it had passed, signs of its presence were still at the airport, with moderate to heavy rain showers and a visibility of 1.5 kilometers. Due to the combination of these two, it made the judgment of height a bit hard to determine, but this does not explain why the plane bounced up 3 times on the runway, why the controls became loose, why the transponder failed, and why the plane smashed into the airport while making an emergency landing. To find out, we need to look at the next factor, the pilot's action. For us to understand just how the pilot impacted this crash, let's look at just 1 minute of this accident. From 21:19 local time to 21:20 local time is where everything that will decide this crash happened. At 21:19 local time, the low visibility with medium to high rainfall caused the pilots to not see the runway properly and made them think that they were high when in fact they were low. Now, already from here, the pilots had already broken one of their company's rules, which is landing in heavy rain is followed by a decisive go-around. Due to the low visibility and heavy rain giving the impression of being high to the pilots when they were low, the pilots went below the glide slope, activating the glide slope alarm. At the same time, the speed was high, reaching 150 knots instead of the planned 138 knots. The co-pilot was alarmed by this and shouted. The captain told him that it was fine, which was incorrect. But here we find a problem. The co-pilot was the pilot flying, so why did he shout out those words concerning speed? It makes us ask the question, who was controlling the thrust levers? Well, to be honest, till today, the investigators don't know who was controlling them. Maybe the captain or the third pilot, we simply don't know. In spite of how the approach was unstable, the crew continued it. As they passed the threshold, they were back to the normal glide slope, but with a speed of 150 knots. Due to the visibility illusion giving the impression of being higher, the co-pilot did not slow down their descent rate. Because of this, the plane landed hard on the front nose wheels with a speed of 153 knots and experienced a G-force overload of 2.49. The Boeing 737-300 in landing configuration can take on a G-force overload of about 2 at max. The 2.45 G-force damaged a bit of the plane. Due to the force and angle that the plane touched down with, the plane bounced back into the air. What they did next made the situation even worse. When the plane bounced for the first time into the air, the co-pilot pushed the yoke forward, and whoever was controlling the throttles pushed the power levers almost to the max. These two actions made the plane go down after reaching 5 feet above the ground, and the speed quickly started going up. The pilot's action made the plane hit the ground again for the second time with a G-force overload of about 2.9 with a speed greater than 157 knots. This caused more damage and made the plane bounce again into the sky. At that time, the co-pilot continued to push the yoke forward, but whoever was controlling the throttles pulled them back as the plane reached 7 feet and started going back down. At this time, the speed was already more than 166 knots. Once again, this made the plane hit the ground hard with a G-force overload of about 2.54. This made the plane bounce once again for the third time. At this time, the captain shouted to the co-pilot to go around. Whoever was controlling the throttles pushed them to the max, but the co-pilot was still pushing the yoke forward. This caused the plane to start going down after reaching 13 feet above the ground. The plane hit the ground with a speed of 170 knots, damaging the nose gear completely. It's at this point that the co-pilot started pulling the yoke, and at 180 knots, the plane started climbing into the sky, ending the decisive 1 minute at 21:20 local time. From here, everything was said and done because all of the damages had now all been set. Now, let us look at what those damages were. The G-force overloads heavily damaged the fuselage, but the majority of these damages were all in the nose gear location. When the plane landed hard, making the plane bounce 3 times, most of those overloads were taken by the nose gear. After the third bounce, the plane hit the ground for the 4th time. Those overloads finally caused the nose gear assembly to give in. This caused critical damage. Some hydraulic lines were cut, causing it to leak. It's likely that some electrical lines going to the transponder were cut, causing it to stop working. And the most important damage that it did was not cut, but partially cut some control cables which linked the yoke and the different control surfaces. This caused the controls to become loose, as the pilots described it to not be responsive. It was now a full-on emergency. The pilots climbed and decided to go back to the airport and make an emergency landing, but everything was rushed. The captain never made any emergency briefing. the pilots simply had no plan. They only thought of one thing: let's land this plane. They never truly diagnosed the problems that the plane had. And as they were on approach for their emergency landing, they were too high and too fast. At this point, the control cables that connected the yoke to the elevators completely stopped working. We don't know if they snapped or if they were jammed, but as the plane reached the runway, being high and with a speed around 227 knots, the pitch angle of the plane was minus 7.5 degrees. The co-pilot pulled his yoke trying to raise the nose, but there were no response. At this point, there was nothing the pilots could have done to save the plane. And with that, the plane smashed into the ground. So really, what was wrong with this crew? Listening to the cockpit voice recorder shows us that crew resource management training was not being used by these pilots. To simply put it, these two pilots should not have been flying together that day because they did not complement each other at all. So how could two inappropriate pilots fly together? Well, this brings us to the third factor: China Southern Airlines. It was found out that some workers of China Southern Airlines had fake licenses and certifications, which ultimately means that errors were bound to happen. And one of these errors was making these two pilots fly together. So, in the end, the cause of this crash began with the company, then dropped to the pilots. At the end of the report, the cause of the crash fully went to pilot error. So, what can we learn from this crash? Follow procedures and rules. They are there for a reason. If the pilots had followed their company's rule of not landing in heavy rain, then we will not be talking about them. If the company had followed procedures and had properly selected a proper crew for this flight, then maybe they would have followed rules and procedures. May the lost souls rest in peace. Thank you for watching this video. Do you think that the pilots are truly to be blamed for this crash? Tell me in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. So please don't forget to hit the like button, to subscribe, and if you want to support this channel, then please, if you can, support me by buying me a coffee. Link in the description. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you are interested of more of my videos, then please check out this video of how a Russian Tu-154 stalled and crashed to the ground. Or if you've seen that, then please click here for something new. Anyways, once again, thank you for watching and see you next time.